So we're going to kind of walk through this chapter together today, but as we do, I need to kind of give you a little bit of background and kind of walk into this story. The two main characters in the story are David, who's eventually going to be king of Israel, and Saul, who is the first king of Israel. Saul is king, but because of Saul's heart for God and Saul's disobedience, God has told Saul that he would not have a legacy, that his son would not follow in his footsteps, that his son would not be king. And God had previously sent the prophet Samuel to David and had anointed David as king, or identified that David would be the next king of Israel. And so that's the kind of dynamic that's going on. You got Saul trying to hold on to his legacy, and David in preparation for the throne. He's not king yet, but he's just coming along. And so Saul, identifying David as the potential next king, is set out to try to destroy David or kill him, because he wants to establish his legacy. In order to do that, he needs to take David out. So David is essentially in hiding, and he's constantly living his life on the run. And that's his reality. That's what's going on in his world. And it's just it's this constant. Now, God had come to David and told David that he would be king. So David is running from Saul, and David has been told by God that he's going to be king, and so David kind of has this idea in his mind that eventually he's going to get somewhere, and somewhere is going to be good, but in the current reality is a mess. The king is trying to kill him. Now, in our audience, how many of you guys or people, how many of you have this just natural desire or natural inclination to be orderly in your life? You like order. You don't really respond well to chaos. When things are chaotic, you try to put order back. Like, you like to know job stability, security, money stability, security. You like your life to be really in order. How many can put themselves in that category? Okay, how many of you are just really comfortable with high degrees of chaos, and you have really just doesn't bother you if the general rule or the world around you is pretty chaotic? How many are like that? Okay, for those of you who raise your hand, I've got nothing in common with you, so I don't know how to talk to you today. And so and this is kind of the breakdown in the early service. The majority of us like to have some semblance of structure and some semblance of order, and so we know certain things about the future. We have kind of ideas about the future. We kind of lay out a plan. And so God has come to David, and God has told David through the prophet that he's going to be king. And so that's kind of unfolding in a really strange way. Saul is trying to kill him, and he's kind of running. And we're going to pick up the story in chapter 23. And so David's running from Saul, and now they told David, behold, the Philistines, who are they're essentially their key opponent, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah and are robbing the threshing floor. So it's around harvest time, and this is a city that's in the mountainous region between the Mediterranean and the Dead Sea, and it's on the more plush side of the mountains. So there's a drier side where it doesn't rain very much, and there's the side where it rains. And this is on the side where it rains a lot, and the Philistines have come, and during harvest time, they've attacked them. So they're basically stealing their food and stealing their sustenance, and they're going to kill them. They're going to starve to death. Therefore, verse 2, David inquired of the Lord, shall I go and attack the Philistines? Or, in other words, should I go and do something that is the job of the king? That's what the king's supposed to do. He's supposed to defend his subject. He's supposed to defend the people. And so he says, shall I go and attack the Philistines? And the Lord said to David, go on. Go and attack the Philistines and save the city. So David's going to have this opportunity to be like a king. And his men said to him, oh man. In verse 3, his men said to him, behold, we're afraid here in Judah. how much more then if we go to Keilah against the enemies, the Philistines? And the guys are like, no, we cannot do this. We're in hiding and we're scared here. If we show ourselves and we fight the Philistines, this is not going to work out well. And so verse 4, David inquired of the Lord again, and the Lord said to him, arise, go to Keilah, for I will give the Philistines into your hand. And so he's confident that God's going to do this, and he gets his men, and they go and fight against the city. Verse 5, they fought the Philistines and brought away their livestock and struck them with a blow, and David delivered the inhabitants of the city. And so you have this moment, this really cool moment where David goes to God, and he says, God, should I act like a king? Should I do this thing? And David's like, and God says, yeah. And his men are like, no, we're not going. So it goes back to God, and God says, absolutely. And then he leads his men, and God delivers the city. And David essentially has established himself now with these people and should possess a loyalty from them. They were going to be killed, they were going to be destroyed, and he took care of them. And so you can understand how this thing would unfold. So he has this city and has these people, and he's acted like a king, and they're loyal to him. And then if he gets another city, then he kind of has a semi-region of people that are going to be loyal to him. And if he expands that region, eventually he will consume the entire nation, and you can see how this thing is going to unfold. You can see how the plan kind of lays out. So David now is in the city, and he is, the people are appreciative, and he stays there. So they were in hiding in the wilderness and going all over the place, but now they're not. They're in this city. In verse 7, told Saul, David had come to Keilah, and Saul says, man, this is awesome. God, so Saul claims God's spot, like he has this special standing with God, or this special dispensation or special blessing from God. God has given David into my hands, for he shut himself in by entering a town that has gates and bars. And he's basically like, this is going to become David's prison. I can go surround the city, and I can kill David. Verse 8, Saul summons the people to go to war, and they go down. Verse 9, David knew Saul was plotting against him. Verse 10, David goes to the Lord and says, O Lord, God of Israel, your servant has surely heard that Saul seeks to come down to destroy the city on my account. Then he asked, will the men of Keilah surrender me into his hand? Will Saul come down as your servant has heard? And so David asked God two questions. Is Saul coming? And will these people defend me? Is Saul coming, and have I got their loyalty? Am I going to be their king? Is this going to work? I've defeated these people, the Philistines. I'm here. They're taking care of me. I'm essentially king now. Is this the spot? Will the men, verse 11, will the men surrender me in your hand? Will Saul come down? O Lord, the God of Israel, please tell your servant. The Lord said to him, he will come down. So God answers David one of the two questions. And then David said, I really need the answer to the second question too. Will the men of Keilah surrender me into the hands of Saul? And God says, yeah, for sure. So Saul has got an army about 3,000. David's about 600. He gets his guys together, and they turn due east, and they go over the mountains, over from the lush side of the mountains. They go to the dry side of the mountains, and they basically are hiding from Saul in what is a arid, pretty miserable place. So they escaped. David, verse 14, David returned to the strongholds in the wilderness, in the hills of the country, in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul sought him every day, but God didn't deliver him into his hands. Saul constantly was looking for him, couldn't find him. He's now really in a pretty not a good situation. Like, he thought he had this reality figured out. Like, he had this plan. It made sense. It's going to work. God has told him he's going to be king. God told him to go and fight against this city. God established the loyalty there. And then when it comes time for this thing to work, so he's hanging out in this place called, this area called Ziph, and there are people there super. Oh, that's like permission to preach forever. Who wants to go to their car now? Man. And so there's these people super creatively called the Ziphites that are from the land of Ziph. And so he's in this region around Ziph, verse 15. David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life. David was in the wilderness of Ziph, and then he and Jonathan hang out for a little bit. Then verse 19. Then the Ziphites, who have no real fight in this thing, the Ziphites went to Saul at Gibeah and said, "Isn't David hiding among us in the threshold of Horesh?" Anybody left their windows open in your car? Run now. And so isn't David hiding among us, verse 20. Now come down, O king, according to all your heart's desire to come down, and our part shall be to surrender him into the king's hand. And so basically the locals send message to Saul and saying, hey, Saul, David is here. He's hanging out in our group. He's hanging out in our area. And if you want him, we'll help you. And so Saul says, look, when I try to find him with an army, it doesn't work. I want you to find out all the kind of trails and the places that he goes when I got to try to find him. Find those trails and figure all that stuff out, and then I'll come and kill him. So verse 21, Saul said, may you be blessed by the Lord. And so he prays a blessing over these people that are wanting to kill David. For you have had compassion on me. And go, make yet more sure, know and see the place where his foot is, and who has seen him there, for it is told me that he is very cunning. See therefore and take note of all the lurking places where he hides, and come back to me with information that I'll go with you. And if he is in your land, I will search him out with all the thousands of Judah. And they rose and went to Ziph ahead of Saul. And so these people do exactly that. And so David's men move a little south. They're basically moving around different mountainous regions, and they move a little south into an area, in a wilderness area called Maon, and so that's where they are. And verse 25, Saul and his men went to seek him, and David was told, so he went down to the rock, and he lived in the wilderness. And so he's in the most ridiculous, out-of-the-way places, very harsh living. And Saul heard it, he pursued David in the wilderness of Maon. And this interesting thing happens. So the local spies have done a really good job. And they basically have pinned David down in this kind of mountainous region. They've pinned David down. They know where he goes to hide. They've pinned him down, and Saul has shown up with his army. So the end of verse 25, he's in the wilderness, and then verse 26, Saul went on one side of the mountain, and David and his men on the other side of the mountain. And David was hurrying to get away from Saul as Saul and his men were closing in. And that phrase, the Hebrew word closing in, implies that they've been surrounded and you're simply closing the circle. Right? And so you remember when you were kids and you got in a fight with your sibling, and you would you'd want to have some kind of, like, you were in for a beating or they were in for a beating, and so then the running ensues, and ultimately you ended up in the dining room, right? And then ultimately in the dining room you use the dining room table as the line of demarcation, as the great defense, and maybe chairs were flying or whatever, but you jockeyed for position around the dining room table. Is it just me that did this? Okay, there's a couple of you. And then eventually you either tried to go under the table or over the table, and someone screamed for mom, and then there was blood everywhere. And You know what I'm talking? So that's what's going on, right? They're going around this mountain. They're jockeying for position around the mountain, but they're jockeying for position in a shrinking circle. Like David is enclosed. His band is closed in on. He is on a mountain, and the base of the mountain is covered. And Saul, now he's jockeying for position up the mountain, but he is essentially encircled, and they're closing in the circle, and they're moving up the mountain. Now, up is the only place you can go. You can go back and forth, but you can't go down and run because that is closed off. So, just a little bit before this, David is sitting in this plush city, pretty happy because these people are loyal to him. Things are working out. God has said he's going to be king. He's got a place. He's defeated the Philistines. He's doing the job of the king. Everything's great. Now, he's running for his life on other sides of a mountain. His friends gone, his help gone. He's got his group, but that city has abandoned him. And he is now trying to figure out a way to solve this problem. The end of 26, and David were hurrying to go away from Saul, and Saul and his men were closing in on David and his men to capture them. It's over. And probably entirely unknown or unnoticed or insignificant and quite irrelevant, someone in the middle of this kind of angling and jockeying, somebody from out of town shows up. A messenger, verse 27, so it's singular, some guy, some person, a messenger comes to Saul and says, "Come as fast as you can. Hurry and come, for the Philistines have made a raid against the land." Come as fast as you possibly can. Come quickly. The Philistines have attacked. You have to come now. And the story unfolds that Saul retires from the field, pulls his soldiers back, and goes against the Philistines. And I cannot imagine how the conversation on the side of the mountain, from David's camp, how that unfolds. How they process that, what's happening. They're probably pretty mad at David. They're having one of those, "See, I told you so" moments, right? Because they never wanted this whole thing to unfold, and they're jockeying. They're all going to die. That's super funny. And we're all going to die. And that's got to go in a book somewhere. We all have $1 million added to our bank account. I'm just trying. And I said we, not me, so you get it too. You're welcome. So, Saul retires. David and his men, I'm sure super confused, have relief and escape. And David sits down and he writes a song, a poem, in response to this event. And that psalm is Psalms chapter 54. So take your Bibles and turn to Psalms chapter 54. I didn't know it was going to rain today. No, that's happening. That's for sure happening. That's all that there is for lunch. Psalms 54. In your Bibles, there's phrasing above a number of psalms that is descriptive of the psalm, and in the original text, that appears. And so that's not something written in, that's part of the text. And so look above it, it says, to the choir master with stringed instruments, a maskin, which is a kind of a, we think it's kind of a type of a song of David, when the Ziphites went and told Saul, is not David hiding among us? So this is David's response to that story, and this is what he writes. He says, "O God, save me by your name and vindicate me by your might. O God, hear my prayer. Give ear to the words of my mouth. For strangers have risen against me, and ruthless men seek my life. They do not set God before themselves." Selah. "Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is the upholder of my life. He will return the evil to my enemies. In your faithfulness, put an end to them. With a free will offering, I will sacrifice to you. I will give thanks to your name, O Lord, for it is good. For he has delivered me from every trouble, and my eye has looked in triumph on my enemies." I just want to kind of walk through this psalm together. There are three different names for God in this psalm. When you see the word God, you'll see the word Elohim, and that is God, the God of Israel, the Creator. Then you'll see the word Lord, and the word Lord, when after the first letter, when the other letters are lowercase, that's the Hebrew name for God. That's Adonai, and that is that He is Master. And then you'll see the word Lord, where all the letters are capitalized, and that's the Hebrew name for God. That's Yahweh. We sometimes read that Jehovah, but that's Yahweh. And so David is going to identify God as the center part, or the central actor, as he unfolds this story. And so he says, "Oh God, the God of Israel, save me by your name," or "save me by your character," or "deliver me by your essence," or "deliver me by who you are, by your identity, and vindicate me by your might." Verse 2, he calls out and he asks God to act on his prayer. He says, "Oh God, the God of Israel, hear my prayer." And in the Hebrew language, the idea of hearing, it is assumed that if you heard a request, that you would respond. And so he's saying, "God, act on my request and give ears to the word of my mouth." That is, act on my behalf. For strangers, people that I don't know and that have no reason to act, have risen up against me, and people without mercy and pity and compassion and character. Ruthless people seek to kill me, and these are not godly people, are not righteous people. They have not set God before themselves. And then verse 4, he says, "Behold, God is my helper." And we kind of have to stop, because we don't use the word behold, and so it doesn't mean anything to us. Like what is the word? Like, when's the last time you used the word behold? Like ladies, you've made dinner and it's on the table, and your husband comes home from work and he opens the door and he walks in and you say, "Behold." We don't use the word anymore. It's just he would think you were, I was going to say drunk, but I didn't want to say that. I thought that would be inappropriate. Something was wrong if you start dropping beholds on him. It's just a strange word. And so when he says behold, what does he mean? Like, what is he talking about? And what's running through his head? And essentially, we would use a phrase more like I don't understand this, or wow, or this is amazing, or I can't get my mind around what I'm about to say. Like this is too much for me to manage in my head. Behold, I'm about to say something that's just marvelous to my mind. Wow. God is my helper. He's like, do you know what happened to me when I was sitting on the side of that mountain? Do you know what happened when, like, I had this plan and like I knew what God wanted and I kind of had a direction and I had actually prayed about it and God said I should do all of these things and then I did all of those things. So like he had this idea, let's go back. He had this idea and it was great. He had this plan and it is completely blown up on him. Like he's about to die. And they're coming up the mountain. Maybe they see this guy coming, this irrelevant person, right? Like one person on a horse or one person walking would not matter when you're surrounded like this. It wouldn't. Maybe they saw it. Maybe they're in the mountains and they couldn't see. Maybe they know, maybe they don't. But all they do know is this: God is my helper. God is my God. See, Saul had claimed God, right? Twice he had said, first when they were inside the city, God has delivered them into my hands. And then when the Ziphites came, he said, may you be blessed by God. Saul is claiming the moral high ground. He's claiming God as his aid. And David says, there is no other explanation that can come from this. That is that God helped me. And he says, I don't know what to do with that. Like his mind, he's just like, wow. God is my helper, the Lord Adonai. He upholds my life. Like, he's not king, and he can't figure out exactly how that's all going to work out, but this is what he knows at this moment in time. The God of Israel, Adonai, Elohim, the supreme power of the universe, Yahweh, helped him. And he says, a freewill offering I will sacrifice to you. I will give thanks to your name, O Yahweh, for it is good. For you, God, have delivered me. My eye has looked, like I saw this with my own eyes. Guys, if you're like me at all, you have got some plan. Like you've got this next year at least reasonably figured out, and you've got some plan. How many of you have ever had one of those plans actually work? Like we've got some plan. And we have some idea of how it's going to unfold, and almost certainly, we're going to lay this plan out, and this plan is going to unfold, and we think we're kind of doing, and maybe we've prayed about it, and God said yes, and we're kind of unfolding this plan, and as this plan unfolds, what we think is going to happen just kind of falls all apart or blows up. And what I'll say to you is at that moment, look and see. Because if you are God's child, then you can claim with David, God is my helper. There is an inescapable reality that comes from this experience in 1 Samuel 23 and then unfolding in Psalms chapter 54. And that is that God is clearly aiding and with David. David's men can see it, Saul can clearly see it, and David knows it. Had he not jockeyed on different sides of the mountain, had it not come to the very end of the very last moment to then see the sovereign hand of God as God had previously worked to create this special moment where he can stand and say, I got to see that God helped me. One of the most beautiful displays of God's help for you is in sending his son. And that we were in a different but similar scenario. David was stuck and he was going to die. We are lost in sin, and God sends his one and only son who dies on the cross as the payment for our sin. And so we who were helplessly, hopelessly alien from God because of what Jesus did could be adopted into God's family by faith in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And if you're here today and you've never trusted by faith in Jesus as your personal Savior, then you are encouraged and welcomed and invited by God to do that. He extends a grace invitation to you to receive Jesus Christ as the one who paid the full and complete penalty for your sin. And guys, as we walk, we'll be together again in another year, in another Father's Day, and we will have had a plan for this year. And it will unfold wildly differently than what we thought it was going to be. And as it unfolds, God, the God of Israel, Adonai, the Master, Yahweh, the sovereign creator, is your helper. He is the one who upholds your very life. Wait and see and watch and experience and observe what God does in a completely different plan than you thought it was going to be. Watch and see God work. And you can stand back and go, this is not what I thought it was going to be, but let me tell you what God did. God is my helper. Father, thanks that we could gather together today.